Hi, welcome to Cloud Computing on Future Systems. In this session, I'm going to demonstrate how to use cloud computing on future systems. We will review a couple of tutorials, for example, deploying virtual cluster, deploying Hadoop cluster, or MongoDB Sharded cluster. We will use OpenStack India as a cloud platform and cloud management software Cloudmesh. With the Cloudmesh, we can launch virtual instances, manage clusters, and configure accounts on command line interface or web interface. Alright, let's get started with the Future Systems account. To use compute resources on future systems, you are required to have an account first. We are not going to discuss how to set up your account in this video, but you can find some information in the web for account creation. There are 3 steps in account creation. Please keep in mind that you need to carefully follow all of these steps to set up your account properly. First step is creating the portal account on future systems. And the second step is doing a project or create a new one with your registered account. The last step is enrolling your access public key pair to the portal account so that you can access to the compute resources on future systems. The last step in this page is using Cloudmesh. If you are new to future systems, you may want to set up Cloudmesh software on your machine. Let's talk about Cloudmesh installation in the next slide. Cloudmesh is a cloud management software available on future systems. It allows you to create, delete, or manage virtual instances on command line interface and web interface as well. It also supports multiple cloud platforms such as OpenStack, Eucalyptus, Amazon AWS, Microsoft Azure, or even HP Cloud. You can install Cloudmesh on your desktop or on virtual machine, for example, VirtualBox. You can find more information how installing Cloudmesh in the following web pages. You also need to configure your future systems account on Cloudmesh so you can access future systems resources on Cloudmesh program your account. There are also few default settings that we need to mention in this page. For example, which cloud platform you like to use, and what key pairs you need to use, or default image or default flavor that you like to use. You may want to use Ubuntu 14.04 as a default image, or you may want to use M1.small flavor as your default flavor. So you need to set up these default settings before to start using the Cloudmesh. Once you complete all the configurations and the settings, you are ready to explore some tutorials about deploying virtual clusters. Let's go to the next page. By the way, if you are lost where you are, you can always find other pages to navigate on the left panel here. Okay. There is also home button in the top left corner, so you can go to the top anytime that you want. You are at the tutorial 1 about deploying virtual cluster. Let's talk about the virtual cluster. Virtual cluster allows you to run your program in multiple nodes. It accelerates the speed of your program, but sometimes it requires manual configuration to build clusters on cloud platforms. To reduce that burden, we offer Cloudmesh, the cloud management software, which provides a command to handle the cluster. And this tutorial briefly describes how to use the Cloudmesh command to deploy virtual cluster. In our example, we use the 3 virtual instances with Ubuntu 14.04 image. So we are going to eventually have the 3 virtual CPUs and 6 gig memories in total. Let's create the virtual cluster with the Cloudmesh command. We need to specify the name of your cluster. We're going to use the virtual underscore cluster as a name, and we specify the number of nodes towards your cluster. In this example, we're going to have 3 virtual instances. The creating and the computing the clusters may take 3 to 5 minutes. As you can see, we are now creating the 3 virtual machines with the Albert virtual machine name. While we are waiting the cluster creation, the Cloudmesh configures the SSH key pairs and allocating the public IP addresses to the virtual instances, and updates host files in the system so that each node can communicate with host names. Once you have created your cluster, you can check the status of your cluster, whether it is ready to use or not. Please find the status of your cluster in the list function. Okay, we can see that there are 3 virtual instances under Albert name. We can use the VM login command to get access to the node in our cluster. Let's try to get access of Albert_1 first. we also need to specify the login name. In this example, we're gonna use the Ubuntu as a login name. Now we are in the Albert_1 virtual instances. We can access each to other node in the cluster. For example, Albert2, we can access to the Albert2, or we can access to the Albert3 as well. Well, now let's go back to the CM terminal. And if you complete your task on virtual cluster, you may want to terminate your cluster and return your compute resources. We offer the cluster remove command to terminate the leads of a virtual instance. We're gonna specify the virtual cluster name that we used. Now, Cloudmesh terminates all of our virtual cluster resources. It deletes the virtual instances and returns the allocated IP addresses. Okay, our next tutorial is deploying Hadoop cluster. Deploying Hadoop cluster is similar to deploying virtual cluster, but it requires more efforts to configure and install Hadoop applications. You can deploy Hadoop cluster manually, but you need to be careful to set up all the details of the Hadoop applications and the configurations. Otherwise, it may not work properly. So, Cloudmesh offers an easy way to deploy a Hadoop cluster with a launcher command. We're gonna see the tutorial in 2.1 about deploying Hadoop cluster with the Cloudmesh launcher command. It deploys the virtual cluster with pre-defined images and default settings, so users don't need to deal with all the details of installing and configuring Hadoop clusters and applications. The command execution is pretty simple. We just need to issue a command with the desired cluster applications. In this example, we're going to request Hadoop cluster with a launcher start Hadoop command. Let's try that command. And we can check the status using the launcher list command. As you can see, your request has been accepted, and the Cloudmesh is now building your Hadoop cluster using the launcher command. We expect to wait about 7 to 8 minutes until it's ready to use. Like the cluster command, it requires some configurations and installing the required packages, but the Hadoop cluster needs more time to set up the relevant packages and the applications. So you need to keep checking the status of your Hadoop cluster to use. Let's try to log in one of the Hadoop cluster. In this example, we're gonna try to the Hadoop 1 node with the EC2 user node and login name. And then we're gonna switch the user as a root, which is a super user. Okay, we are now in the Hadoop 1 node in the Hadoop cluster. You can also access other node in our cluster, for example Hadoop 2. Well, we have 5 virtual instances in Hadoop cluster, so we can access Hadoop 5 as well. I'll go back to the CM terminal. Like the cluster command, once you complete all your tasks in your Hadoop cluster, you can terminate your Hadoop cluster using the launcher command. Before terminating your Hadoop cluster, you need to check the status. It's running, so we're gonna terminate that Hadoop cluster using launcher stop command. And we're gonna specify the name to terminate. If we reissue the launcher list, we can see that the deleting is in the progress. So it will be removed, and then the Cloudmesh deletes the virtual instances and returns the allocated IP addresses or the security groups, etc. We don't have that Hadoop cluster anymore. It's cleaned up already. Alright, we have discussed using cloud computing on future systems with a few tutorials. We deployed the virtual cluster in the first tutorial with a Cloudmesh cluster command. Cloud cluster command dynamically configures cluster with few options, and it allows us to get access of a cluster or terminate with a simple command execution. In our second tutorial, we deployed the Hadoop cluster with a Cloudmesh launcher command. It saves time to deploy Hadoop clusters and configures, and reduce the chances of getting installation errors, the human errors, compared to the manual installation. We use the OpenStack Heat orchestration tool, which handles creating the virtual instances with the proper settings, and we also use chef recipes to install required packages and configure systems properly. Overall, our future systems have to use cloud platforms with cloud management software, the Cloudmesh, so you can focus on your research with the future systems. If you have any questions or technical issues, please use our forums at GitHub. You can ask your questions here, or you can report bugs or issues. or there is a FAQ sections to provide some information that you might need. We also provide manuals and other information about Cloudmesh. Please find the documentations at mycloudmesh.org. It provides the manuals and the tutorials and other important informations for the Cloudmesh. You can also find the video clips at YouTube, or you can download the original videos to see the how to use Cloudmesh for deploying the virtual clusters. Thank you for watching to Introduction to Cloud Computing on Future Systems. We will continue working on our future systems to help your research and analysis on our systems. Thank you so much.